Hi, guys. So previously on the podcast, I was talking about chill subs. Yes. So if you don't know what chill subs is, listen back to that episode. But really quick, something I want to just do a follow up or circle back to from that episode is you may remember that I was searching for Alien Magazine. Now, this came up when I was just doing a Google search for it and I clicked on it and then it showed this. So possibly it looks like Alien Magazine is defunct. It doesn't have might be defunct, it just says defunct. And the reason being, right, their website's still up, but when you go to submit, right, it says their submittable page no longer is up. So yeah. So I'm not sure why. I haven't heard, anything about that. Yeah. So I hope Alien Magazine comes back. Same thing with Lit Shark, which said might be defunct. So I think if the magazine or journal or even press, shows up as defunct, it doesn't appear in your search results. That's what I think. Um, or unless I didn't clear my filters, but I think that's what happens. It no longer populates in there for, being discoverable. But yeah, I hope they come back. And yeah, again, I covered, sort of hiatus and defunct magazines on one episode, so you can look at that and give it a listen. Yeah, back to. But anyways, for this episode, you may have seen I was just on Submittable, right? Now, for those of you unaware of what Submittable is, I'll do a little, quick overview of it for you. Yeah? So, Submittable, right? It's a submission management system. A lot of publishers, magazines, presses around the world leverage it for intaking submissions, whether it be poetry, essays, photography, videos, even, and yeah, and short stories and flash fiction, all of that. Now, Submittable was founded back in 2010, I believe, and yeah, in 2024, I think it shows they had 66.4 million in revenue, or 66.6. It could be either one, but yeah. Anyways, Submittable is no doubt very cool, but again, for those of you who have been following this podcast very closely, you may recall Dippity Lit Mag and Dippity Press are no longer using Submittable for intaking submissions, from writers and artists. And if you're curious on why, maybe I'll do an episode specifically on Subfolio. We're just starting to dive into it now, so it's quite early, but I may totally do, a submitter perspective episode like this, similar to Submittable, right? So, yeah, in any case, I would say Subfolio is, if you're looking for something very close to Submittable, Subfolio is definitely up there. Like it's like in the number one slot of my faves for sure. I also have a Substack article that sort of has a breakdown comparison of all the features and notes. Just to overview. I haven't used every submission management system in existence, but I'm aware of quite a few other ones out there, and yeah, some of them are lower cost than Submittable and some of them aren't. So, listen back to episode 15 when I was discussing alternatives, and I would recommend listening to the CLMP membership episode and even episode 2, for other places to discover opportunities and homes for your work, right? And yeah. So, anyways, let's dig in here. Yeah. So, I will do an example with, we could do this. So, let's say I'm looking for a lit mag or journal that, I don't want to see any fees, right? I want it to be a free submission. So this is what happens, right? And you can see I have some drafts in here because I'm doing an example of you guys in advance. So yeah, so these, aren't necessarily all fee free. No, they're not. You know why? So this is why I'll show you. If you click into this, right, and this is what happens, right? Let's use Big Whoopie Deal as an example. So yeah, you can see this ends in 5 hours, but not necessarily. This call could change if the editor goes in and extends it. Let's say 5 more days or 3 more months or whatever. Sometimes lit mags and journals do extend deadlines because they haven't maybe filled out an issue, hit maximum capacity or looking for more submissions, and that happens. But yeah, you will typically see the guidelines and the categories. You can also typically access this on most lit magazine journals websites, right? They'll have a direct submit button and it'll take you out to the category too that way. Now, after this page, if you go on to submit, right, it's going to ask for your address, mailing address, contact info, and yeah. So I'm not going to click on submit here, but I have a page open here and I had another tab open. But yeah, this is what it looks like basically, the fields of that. And then you just save and continue. But I don't have anything filled out here, of course. But yeah, for privacy reasons. But um, you could, I guess I could do test in there, but yeah, typically lit magazine journals like to have your information on file in the event, let's say you get an acceptance, they can send contributor copies to you. They can contact you, reach back out, about events. It could be a nomination event, awards, or whatever. But yeah, and typically there are reminders, in calls and things like that. So the reason why, we go back here, the reason why Big Whoopie Deal and some others too also show up under no fee, but when you go in, this is what happens, when you're submitting in. So you can see I'm in the call. This is after the address page here, when you do save address and continue. See, the title of submission is required, the cover letter is required, the file upload, right? But then we have this fees required. So that is very, you could say it could be misleading to poets because this shows up under no fees, right? But here there are fees required. It seems like they have tip jar as a required amount, $6, and then they have other options here. Now, I think this is a problem on both sides, I think Submittable needs to address this. I don't know if Submittable's ever going to listen to this episode, but this isn't a sponsored episode. None of these are, just sharing, things I come across. So, um, and yeah, so the thing about this, I feel like Submittable, on this page, the Discover page, they just need to go in and add some toggles in here for has fees or some fees or, things like that. Because, on the back end, when you're setting up buckets as an editor, of a Litmagger journal, let's say you have a Submittable account, right? There are forms you can build out this form, right? And this happens because they didn't use the fixed amount, on the back end. On Submittable, you can put in a fixed amount and then it won't show up under, no fee, right? And when they do this way, it keeps showing up. There's form check boxes, so it looks like they set up form check boxes for this bottom portion and made those required. And I think that is problematic because then poets will, encounter the listing, they'll drill in and be like, they'll be excited to submit and everything. And then, they see it's a fee actually to submit, right? Although it was showing up in the filtered results of no fee. So I think Submittable needs to create some sort of detection for the bottommost check boxes, that option for building out a form, when others, put that as a required, fees in there so that it shows up, so it doesn't show up, under no fee and shows up, let's say in another category or button like has fees or some fees in there, required. What I like about Subfolio, for instance, right, they have a minimum, there's a minimum listed and it indicates there are fees, right? It doesn't say zero fees. It totally says what the minimum amount and to anticipate fees, right? In the category call. Now we got rid of fees at Dippity Lit Mag on July 12th, right? So yeah. Anyways, this is problematic because, a lot of poets become upset and writers, and anyone submitting when they see this. I think, something Big Whoopie Deal could also do is to, maybe do a fixed amount and, to not have that bottom or most form checkbox options. I think they should just, you know, it's possible to still have, a fixed amount and to add, the check boxes along the bottom, but not having it required, having it optional. The thing about that, I don't know how many form boxes they have, whether they hit their max on with Submittable, because there are restrictions on each plan, how many boxes and form fields you can use, which might be why they have done it this way. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I think they should switch this to a fixed fee and then have like a separate check boxes for, expedited, optional, and these other ones, right? I feel like they should do that. Or what would be better for them to do is to create separate call buckets for this, expedited response, the prize, the 24 hours, and critique, right? And then have this, their submission, if they want to have submission fees, right? Have this as a fixed amount of $6. So creating separate buckets for expedited response, prize, and 24 hours and critique, so that it doesn't, show up under no fees. Yeah, because you can totally create other buckets and categories, so I think they just should separate these out. And yeah, it's nice to have everything in one form, but I think, based on how Submittable is structured, I don't know if they're ever going to address that, where others are using the bottommost form fields and they're not being detected as having fees required, right? In the checklist option, rather than, if they don't use the fixed amount. Now, you may not understand what I'm talking about, but on the back end, yeah, this happens because there's no fixed amount in the first field, like unsubmittable on the back end. So if they had checked fixed amount $6 and just done that, it would have showed up, as having fees, right? But yeah, I think they need to separate these buckets into separate call categories out for expedited response and the prize and 24 hours, or to create a separate bucket for those who want fast responses. That's what some places do. I think that would be more appropriate than doing it this way, because it's going to cause others to continue to be upset when they, click no fee in the filtering and then it shows up as a fee. And yeah, we even ran into this a little bit, in the past, at Dippy Lit Mag when we had our old structure, right? With, let's say, example, right? First time is free, second time isn't, or if there's a tier structure, in fees or levels, right? And you don't have a fixed amount and you're using the bottommost form checkboxes, right? It's going to, still say no fees, but there are some fees there still. So yeah, I think that's problematic. So they need to address this in the submission management system too, and I feel like Big Whoopie Deal also should restructure their submission categories. Of course, right? You can only have a certain amount open. I don't know if they're on the CLMP plan, or what the plan they're on with Submittable or anything like that. But yeah, um, yeah, just keep that in mind. I feel like this should be restructured because this is not a good experience for others. And another one that a lot of poets talk about, that's come up, and I've submitted to, and this is Big Whoopie Deal's website, by the way. So yeah, and another one others talk about in the community, and I've submitted to them in the past myself too, is the blood pudding, and yeah, so this if you go out here to submit, it'll take you out to their call categories. So let's go here, so you can see they have their general rules, guidelines here. In a lot of lit magazine journals, they have their guidelines on their website, and additional to the call categories, where you can see exactly what the call is asking for, because a lot of directories and listings oftentimes want to see that, that it's maintained and updated. But yeah, so you'll see Submittable here, and this is essentially what it looks like, when places have call categories. And this is what I'm saying. I think, Big Whoopie Deal, and even, they only can have a certain amount open, perhaps. I don't know what plan Big Whoopie Deal and you know, the blood pudding are on for Submittable. So I don't know. When we were on Submittable on our plan, we could only have 6 buckets open at a time, So yeah. So I'm not sure whether they're part of the CLMP membership or not. I haven't looked that up, or whether they're in the directory or not. I don't know. But in any case, you can see this is how you expand guidelines in Submittable and stuff. You can see now, others have said that this, some see it, they keep extending it, and I don't know what the reason is behind that. Maybe it's because they haven't had enough submissions for the year or anything like that. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, and yeah, so I was following the Lit Mag news, and I wanted to talk about this one because I've submitted in the past, and they reached out to me to, on when you do a draft, again with them, and they sometimes places say, hey, finish your draft to get you to finish your submission. I've never really used that feature of Submittable. I think it can be annoying to others and things like that, so I don't like doing that. But we're not on Submittable anymore in any case. But yeah, so yeah, you can see the call carriers here. Now the problem again with same thing that Big Whoopie Deal had, right? So let's let's go over here. So you can see again the address field for blood pudding, and then this is again the next page it takes you to. If you click save address and continue, I didn't enter my address fields in there, of course, but yeah. So titles required again, cover letter, file upload, and again here, look, fees required, right? Tip jar, expedited, writer's plot, 24 hours. This is problematic because again they're going to show up as let's do it here. Let's type blood pudding here. So, yep, look, no fee. It shows up under no fee, but there are in fact fees, right? So, yeah, that's the problem with when you do the bottommost form checkbox options rather than put a fixed fee of $6 in there, submitters are going to come into contact with them. They're going to be like, "Whoa, wait, why are there required fees? It showed no fee in submittable. There should be an option where there's no fee then, right?" So it's confusing for them, it's misleading, and then it impacts them. They're like, "Yeah, it's a turnoff, right, when others see this." So yeah, you just want to keep that in mind. I absolutely, everyone prefers no fees. Obviously, they said it's a volunteer press and they put it towards, right, the publication. But I think this should be restructured. I'm not sure how many buckets they can have on their plan. I'm not sure what plans these places are on, but in any case, um I think, they need to have separate buckets for this. They could do a separate bucket for expedited in 24 hours. And yeah, and then maybe on their website, they could just put a donation section, right? And then have this as a fixed fee if they really want fixed fee of $6. That would minimize that. Of course, a lot of others choose the no fee option and filter. That's the most popular selection, no fee, right? But I feel like, it's misleading if you have this structure because of the way that is. And again, I think Submittable also needs to address this where they detect this, bottommost form field checkboxes that have fees required in them, because the filtering doesn't reflect that at all, when it's like this. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. And yeah, so this comes up from time to time and I've seen it myself. So I thought I'd just share. Um, you know, so yeah, something we've done in the past on some is like to have a fee waiver checkbox too, and then other options. But yeah, um, if there's no fixed fee, right, to give a free option or a option for writers who cannot absolutely pay a fee, right? So yeah, but I hate fees again. That's why we discontinued them at Dippy Lit Mag and Dippy Press. I'm just giving examples here. I don't know much about. I can't recall about blood pudding or Big Whoopie Deal. I read a little bit about them in the past. I do recall submitting to the blood pudding in the past myself, though. So anyways, I know things can be expensive and things like that. That's why places have expedited options and fees. But there are, as I showed you in the past podcast episode, there are quite a few, not quite a few, quite a lot of lit mags and journals that have been running fee free, right? So they oftentimes, there are different ways, as I mentioned in episode 1, right, to um, generate funding to do that, to sustain it. It is very tough, very tight, but it's possible. Yeah, so I feel like they just need to restructure their categories and form fields here. And Submittable also needs to address this, to detect those bottommost form field checkboxes, that are stating fees are still required. But, yeah. So I hope that makes sense. And yeah, so let's go back to the Discover page here. Submittable, though, overall, I would say, although, we left it, it's still pretty awesome, I had I'll give you an example on my account too, just a second here, but here you can do tags, and sort by tagging. And, on the back end, editors can choose tags for calls. And this is really helpful. You can even find, volunteer staff positions sometimes posted in here too by keyword search. And yeah, so I think that's awesome. You can let's click on something here. Or we can search just like photography. Yeah. So photography, let's see if there are any like staff positions. If I type volunteer, let's see what shows up. There's an episode I did on how to find more opportunities, right? So yeah, see, you can find submission reading opportunities here. Looks like Chestnut Review Auxiliary is looking for volunteer readers. And yeah, there's other things you can come across in here, a lot of great opportunities, So yeah, you can also filter by deadlines, no deadlines. Of course, deadlines can change. It happens, especially if there are life events or things like that, or schedule changes on the team. But yeah, you can select dates and things like that. Yeah, it's very easy to use. I highly recommend bookmarking the Discover Opportunities page. Submittal has. Yeah, so I will share. Again, Subfolio. Check it out. Subfolio does have a page like this, and as more publications join it, right, it'll grow, right? We lost all of our submittable traffic, right, because we left it, right? Because a lot of traffic goes through this opportunities page. I'm not sure, whether they rotate these out, but I'm aware, whenever we had, like a near deadline, it would push us to, the top, like which one's ending, right, soon, like a call. And we would see like Dippity Lit Mag, right, ends in like this, like example with Beyond Words. I've never submitted to them that I recall, but yeah. So yeah, you can see there are a lot of calls in here. I've heard some things about Straight Lit, that were concerning. So I don't know. I've never submitted to them, but I can't recall if they have fees or not. Again, you can look into that, but they may some of these places again where you do no fee, you have to just be mindful about that. What I just discussed, right? Whether they're using the fixed fee or not, or using the bottommost form field check boxes and saying, oh, there are actually fees required, or saying the tip jar is required. I feel like they should just convert that to a reader fee, a fixed amount, and have separate bucket categories for expedited and 24-hour review, and even a prize call, right? Although it's easier to have everything in one form, I think it's harder for others, right, who just want no fees and want a great experience, right, both on Submittable and through the Lit Mag Journal. So yeah, so I'm going to go back here. Let me see if I can find it for you guys. This is an example of Plants and Poetry Journal. So I just wanted to show you an option where there's no fees involved here. So this is what it looks like, right? Required field, email, date submitted, photo and biography. And not every place has you enter a title. And if that happens, I'll show you, if they're not asking for the title of your piece in here and they're just asking for here. Read the guidelines very carefully. Some places do concealed blind reads for contests and things to make it fair. So if you're putting your name on your entry and things like that, or you're exceeding the amount of allotted poems, some places will outright decline you over things like that, as small as that. Oftentimes, I've also seen some short story places, right? Let's say they ask only for one short story at a time. You submit three. Some places have only reviewed the first one that shows up for them. They don't go to the next two. Some places aren't, that's not a deal breaker for them, but I think, to keep everything, if it's a contest or something like that with a cash prize and award, that wouldn't be fair, right? So a lot of places outright decline things that do not follow the guidelines, of course, absolutely. So always reread the guidelines. Again, I have an article on, reasons why poets and writers get declines out on the Lit Mag Lab Substack. You can find that, under the one of the tips section bars on my Substack. So you could do a keyword search, yeah. So one last thing I want to cover before I sign off here for today. I want to go back to my Submittable page. So this is, where you'll see this is my oldie account. So I have it I have it flipped to the status of the oldest time. So it looks like I started using Submittable I had another. This is one of my other accounts, but I had submitted via email, to a bunch of places too. I see about 146 entries in my account in terms of submissions, but in total, I would say I have about somewhere between maybe 250 and 300 submissions in total. A combination of email, submittable, maybe Oli Ada, um, yeah, and a few other submission systems I've gone to in the past to find opportunities and things. So yeah, this is what it looks like. When you have a submittable account and you start, submitting it, you can see I withdrew all of these and things like that. So I ended up redoing some poems, and then some I ended up putting in other publications totally. So I decided not to move forward with those. Now, this one, I did not withdraw it for that. reason, this one I never heard back from, and that's why I withdrew it. So I submitted to them in June 11th, 2023, and I withdrew that after almost close to a year. It was May 2024. They never responded back to me. So that happens sometimes. Sometimes when you submit to a place, they won't respond. It happens. It and Sometimes you'll see a rejection and they didn't send you a letter, and that happens too. There's an option in Submittable where you can, as an editor or whoever, maybe they have first line screening readers too involved in the decline process possibly too. So sometimes they can, there's an option, right, to send a letter, not send a letter. There's an option to send a letter, and notify you, but there's also an option to send a decline without notifying the submitter. So I don't like that. I like notifying others, having making sure it's in their inbox. I'd seen for Dippy Lit Mag out on Duotrope, some said there was like a small percentage, or very just I think one, or I'm not sure how many, but exactly a very small percentage showing never heard back from. I'm not sure. We send responses out to everyone. Keep in mind, sometimes emails get lost in inboxes. It's happened. We had a poet who got an acceptance that we sent out to them, right? And they didn't find it for like 4 months. So what I had to do was send them an email outside, grab their contact deeds and send them an email outside, and they're like, oh, I just completely never saw it. And yeah, that happens sometimes. And sometimes Submittable has, like, all systems have glitches now and then. We've had cases where someone got a letter sent to them like 4 times and it wasn't us. We just clicked it once and it sent it like multiple times to them. And that was, it happens, like glitches and bugs sometimes, right? But Submittable has always addressed those things. Same thing, with we're on Subfolio now, and support's great, absolutely, and everything. So it's important to have that support there to address things like that, and to have get back up and running when things are down. Right. Anyways, so yeah, I mentioned, right, title isn't always required. Some places that don't have a title entry, in there, it'll just show up as a number recorded. And this is what I meant earlier, right? That it's preferable that you do this. You don't have to put the 4 poems total. I just did that, but some places require you put the total, the titles, and separate them out. But typically, what you can do is just do the title forward slash title forward slash, right? If they have that field there. What I also sometimes do is just a general summary email, and I have some fun names, I know, guys. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of times if they don't have the name field, it'll just be a number. So you see, I like to do, and you can see my first acceptance in Submittable was December 9th, 2022. That wasn't my first acceptance from a magazine or journal. That was my first Submittable acceptance. My first magazine acceptance was actually not Kindergarten Mag, it was Lothlorien Journal. Yeah, Lothlorien Journal is awesome. Maybe I'll do an episode on them. Lothlorien Journal, and yeah, and then Kindergarten Mag, and then Fandom Kangaroo was my first Submittable acceptance after hundreds of tries, guys. So yeah, I submitted to places, a mix of email and Submittable predominantly, and I tried Oleada as well. That's another submission management system that some use. So yeah, you can see I did 2 oatmeal bowl poems. I don't remember what poems those were, guys, at all. But just know I totally have eaten a lot of oatmeal, especially the last 2 years, I would say, for sure. If you're wondering why I don't, my folks, they always buy oatmeal, guys. Okay, so maybe that's what I was thinking about that day. I have no idea what happened that summer, back 2 years ago. So, anyways, yeah, you can come up with fun titles, and some don't mind at all, when you're submitting. But I think it's most appropriate to do it this way. Just disregard me putting 4 poems total here. Some places have you put the total amount and then the titles. But yeah, I would just recommend doing this, title forward slash title forward slash. And if it's one singular poem, right, just that. And yeah, I ended up withdrawing things because I had other things come up, and I decided to put a lot of my poems in a separate publication. I was like, nah, I wanted to turn this into a fun publication and do it, and just drop them in there. And I didn't feel like the poems I submitted to some places were appropriate for their call too. Yeah. So every lit magazine journal has a different vibe, and it's important to read through, the work that's been accepted in the past. So keep that in mind. Yeah, but I never heard back from this one for sure. I didn't hear back from Taco Bell Quarterly. I've submitted to them too. They pay, I think, $100 per poem, if I could be wrong. But anyways, Taco Bell Corey's still awesome. I love Taco Bell Corey. The name's fun and everything, but I never heard back I think from a couple places for sure, and it'll happen to you. Yeah. I think, if you're going to do expedited review or something like that, it's only, some places don't give you, refunds or anything like that, at all. But what I've done in the past, let's say something comes up on our team or we missed it or something happened in our submission system. If we don't meet the expedited review time, let's say you chose 1 to 2 weeks, you want a decision back, right? Faster than like 3 months or 4 months, right? If we missed that time frame or something happened there where it wasn't expedited, I refund that money because I feel bad. That's not right. We didn't meet the time, right, that you expected to hear back from us. So that's what I do. I don't know how other places handle that. I know some places do that as well. But yeah, for most part, fees are non-refundable. So you want to be very careful if you're submitting to any place that has a contest fee or anything. You want to read the guidelines very carefully again. So yeah, you can filter again, by accepted, and yeah, I think this page has been sitting a little bit, so that's why it's not moving, but that's okay. Let me click on a tab here. So yeah, let's go back to my submissions. And yeah, so again, if you're an editor and you have a Lit Mag or journal and you're using Submittable and you have a personal account, there's, upper right, you can toggle between that typically. Yeah, that's what I've seen. But I'm no longer on Submittable, so I won't, do that at all. I'm just showing you the submitter's perspective strictly for a lot of the submission systems. I won't, I'm just talking about like the back end and what that looks like a little bit, if you ever think about starting a Lit Mag or journal. So yeah, this page has been sitting a while, so that's why it's sort of spinning. I mean, I can refresh it. Let's see if that helps. We will see if that helps, guys. Let's see. Yeah, I just had to refresh the page. That's it. It was sitting a little bit too long. So yeah, you can see my first acceptance, December 9th, 2022 in Submittable. My first Submittable acceptance. And I was like, yeah, I got green. So I don't have hundreds of acceptances or a lot, I think in total. I think you saw in Chill Subs, right? I listed out 8 places or 8 poems. And yeah, not 8 poems, but yeah, there's I think I put 2 poems for Lothlorien Journal and 1 entry. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I got a couple acceptances this year, guys, so they were all humor related mostly. So I've been writing some humor poetry. Anyways, you can see I had fun titles, right? Some spoken word accepted. Oddball Magazine's awesome. Fandom Kangaroo, I'm not sure what their status is currently, but really love them too. That was for print and online, by the way. And yeah, so you can when you start submitting to places, a lot of, if you go out on social media and stuff like that, what some people do, or poets and writers, right, they screenshot their rejection letters again and they put them on social media and share those, or sometimes they'll do like almost like blackout poetry with them, and try to make the message say something else. I've seen that from time to time, from a couple different poets in the community for sure. Yeah, they have other things in here. I'm not going to cover everything about Submittable, but you can see, that, you can export this out as submissions and things like that. And it's beneficial again to have their titles in there if you're exporting, right? Then you can search and find it, right? Whether it be an Excel spreadsheet or, yeah, it helps to stay organized. Submittable is great for that. Chill Subs is great for that again, but Chill Subs doesn't have Chill Subs at one point in time was sort of, they thought about developing their own submission management system, but I think that's no longer on the table. I don't see it anymore. Who knows? Maybe I don't know. But Subfolio, yeah. I highly recommend you check out Subfolio too. There aren't a lot of publications on it quite yet, but it's fairly new and I think it's awesome. So I'm very happy that we're on Subfolio and off of Submittable. I'm not saying Submittable is awful or anything like that. I love Submittable personally. Still, I think it's great. Um, it helps a lot of writers, and artists, find great opportunities and homes for their work. So what works for me may not work for you. So you have to see what you like if you're ever going to start a lit mag or journal, or if you're a poet or writer. Everyone has their preference. Some people don't like using submission management systems are like, nah, I just like using my email. I don't want to, create accounts on these platforms. I don't really care for all that. But I think it's really nice to have, you know, um, the ability to, filter and track things with active, accepted, completed, declined, withdrawn. Now, the completed status, at some point in time, some lit mags and journals use that status. and it confuses others because, they like to see the green accepted status, right? The completed status, some places use it as that they finished publishing and everything, or any task tied to the submission. And that's what we did briefly at Dippy Lit Mag, but then I reverted them all back to accepted, green, because that just makes sense, right? They were accepted, they were published. I just put a note, right? Track their date, the recorded publishing date, and that's it. The completed status maybe is for things that could be maybe volunteer staff applications or something like that. I don't know. Other tasks, that aren't perhaps, tied to that. But some places, I haven't seen a lot of places use the completed status, but from time to time I do see that too. But yeah, a lot of poets prefer that it's left as the accepted status because that leaves it as green, and they can have all of their submissions accepted side by side. So it's confusing if one place, says it's completed and another says accepted, right? So you want to just keep that in mind. Anyways, yeah, so I'm just showing you the submitter's perspective, what it's like on account on my oldie account here. It has a search function and following other stuff, in account settings, the account settings. So if you go in the upper right here, I'm not going to click on it, but if you go in the upper right, click on personal settings here, it'll take you to this page, and UIs can change again, but for right now, this is the location as of, July 2025. So yeah, you can see, yes, I want access to Discover, you can click on that, sure. I don't like receiving a bunch of emails and stuff, so I just, typically have the defaults here. I may have removed options. I can't remember exactly. But yeah. So you can do that. Mostly what I do is just bookmark the Discover Opportunities page. That's it. And you could do the same thing like with Subfolio, right? Bookmark their uh Discover page, or the search page, right, of it. Yeah, so you don't have to, as a founding editor of a lit mega journal, if you're going to start one, right? Submittable again is not the only one out there. There are other options, that are very budget friendly, or about, yeah, or about the same as Submittable too. There's some out there too. But yeah, so you have to again test drive these and see which works best for you. And in terms of, from a submitter's perspective, I think a lot of us can agree it's easy, to send an email to places that allow that, right? That only do email submissions. But I think those they can get lost easily, emails and things like that. So I think, with Submittable's existence, Subfolio, Oleada, Moksha, even Google Forms is better, I think, than just strictly straight up email. Having some sort of, tracking or organization, of submissions, both for the submitter and editors, I think it's so beneficial. So yeah, um, so some quite a few places out there, you saw through my chill sub searching on the past episode, right? Levered Submittable, right? And they only accept submissions through Submittable. So yeah, from time to time, as an editor, I've seen poets try to, back when briefly Dipty had Google Forms and used email briefly, but that was really tough to do. I didn't like it at all. It was hard, it's hard to keep tabs on things that way, and your email storage can easily fill up, right? And then you have to pay for a higher storage plan if you want to keep everything like archived or something. And the good thing about, Submittable, right, it has for, editors and archive, easy archive, same thing with Subfolio, easy archival of submissions and things like that. And yeah, I think, again, I recommend, listening back to episode 15 and episode 2 and a few of the other CLMP membership episodes. Again, I discuss what the community of literary magazine and presses is, and, the benefits of doing the membership. Now, if you do the CLMP membership, you don't have to, use Submittable, you could, like us, right? We have the Submittable membership, right? But we're on Subfolio, right? So, there are tons of benefits with the CLMP membership. You get to keep on the loop on things, same thing, Chill Subs has those newsletters that go out, right? About, Sub Club, the Forever Workshop, on their higher tiered plans, right? Those are beneficial too, to stay in the loop. Lit Mag News with Becky, it's good to stay informed and organized, no matter what you're doing, in life, right? It's always a good idea to be aware of what's going on in the lit mag world and community as a writer, as a poet, especially if you're going to submit to places. Yeah. Um, So I think that's all, so again, I'm just giving examples. So a lot of lit mags and journals or online magazines, Pout Poetry, I've submitted to them a couple times in the past, but no acceptances thus far. But so yeah, you see how they have the submit button here, and then just takes you to a lot of places have it set up this way. Their submission management system. For us, it's Subfolio. For palette poetry, it's Submittable. And you can see, right, they have fees for their prize here, and they have Async Studio. So I think this is fairly new. I haven't seen this from them. I think it's like a feedback session. They have others partake in, and it's kind of pricey, I think. Although it doesn't state any fees here, I think, if you read further down on this feedback session here, you'll see, one poem if you're requesting a single letter, $99, or three-letter option, $199. To me, that's kind of steep. I know, a lot of lit mags and publications, I'm not aware of, their staff setup or anything like that, but, a lot of us are volunteer based, right? We do this in our spare time. Yeah, and things can be expensive, right? And, I believe Pat Poetry, again, also pays poets for their work and things like that. They use whatever they get from that, I assuming, to cover costs, expenses, all of that stuff, right? And funds, right? But that's a bit steep, I'd say. Just, I've seen some places have free feedback sessions, and they're out there for sure. But I've seen some have a range of like $20 to $50. But yeah, that's a little bit steep. But I would say I'm a fan of palette poetry. I stop in from time to time to read publications and stuff like that too. So I think the Async Studio is new. I could be wrong. I'm not sure when they started that, or maybe I just noticed it now. In any case, yeah, I was just giving an example of how some lit mags and journals have their submit button visible and there, right? So I'm going to walk through a couple other lit mags and journals too along the way. In regards to Subfolio, maybe I'll do a submitter's perspective episode like this for you guys too on it. It is a fairly new submission management system. It's awesome. I really like it. We're just, getting up and running on it still a little bit here. So yeah, several others exist out there again, but I would say the top ones, I've come into contact with are, Subfolio, Duosuma, and, Submittable. A lot of places use Submittable. Moksha is kind of pricier, but yeah, and a lot of lit mags and journals, if you filter and chill subs, just take intake submissions via email. But yeah, as an editor, again, I'm circling back to this as lit mag journal, right? Everything has to go through their dedicated submission management system if they're using one. So do not email editors your submissions and stuff like that. Just don't do that. If they're outright saying you have to submit through Submittable, you have to submit through our submission management system, whatever it may be. Subfolio, like for us, Oleada, if someone's using Oleada, or there are other ones out there, in the article on episode 15 that I plugged in, I believe. So yeah, yeah, just keep that in mind. From time to time, we've seen poets try to not, go into the submission management system and do that, but no, everything has to go through there. Um, and occasionally we do some spotlight things like that outside, for fun, through our newsletter and stuff, and things like that. But everything else, all of our submissions, like 99% of them, go through our submission management system. So yeah, it just keeps everything organized, right? If you have things in email, if you have things over there, right, it's things are going to get lost. You're probably going to miss something, and someone's not going to hear back from you, and they're going to be upset. So yeah. Again, as a submitter, right, there are going to be cases out there you submit to places and there's nothing but crickets, right? You can send up follow-up email messages, right, through submittable message. And keep in mind, some places do let you open submissions for editing. Submittable has KB articles on what that entails, when an editor opens it for editing for you. But I feel like their instructions weren't, you know, I think they have. It took me a little bit to find that KB back then. When I started allowing that open for editing, as long as it hasn't been moved to in progress or hasn't been reviewed yet and is in progress, right, in the rounds. So some places totally let you open it for editing. To let's say you make a mistake, or you want to swap out the file because you accidentally put the wrong. You missed something. Let's say you just realized you submitted the wrong poem, or something's missing in your file. or things like that before they review it. That's okay. Some places allow that, not all. So yeah, so read the guidelines very carefully on what these lit magazine journals have in their guidelines, what's permitted, what's not permitted. You have to be very careful about that. Absolutely, read the guidelines 2-3 times. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so that's all. So check out the discover page of Submittable again. It's you can find a lot of opportunities, in overall, and it's yeah, so you can do a lot, with thanks to these submission management systems. It just makes everyone's lives easier. Same thing with chill subs, it's a great database. So yeah, dig into it, dive in. It's easy to create an account on a lot of these submission management systems. It takes like a few seconds, not even minutes, guys, to whether you make a chill subs account, submittable account, to find more opportunities. Subfolio, right, is new. There aren't a lot of publications on there yet, but eventually it'll grow and we'll get our traffic back, right? When we moved again off of Submittable, we got our traffic zapped, but that was to be anticipated, right? Because a lot of lit magazine journals have been leveraging Submittable for quite some time. But yeah, um, yeah. So it's totally up to you as an editor, as a submitter, what you feel comfortable with using, and yeah. But there's a place you really want to submit to, and they're using a new submission management system. You just have to quickly create an account. That's it. It doesn't take. It's not too bad. So yeah, tons of opportunities out there. A lot of great tools and resources, available, nowadays. So it's very easy to stay organized, to stay updated, and things like that. You can save, and and it also shows, in here, sometimes where you've submitted before too. There's an indicator status too. Um, so I think an example would be, let me see if I can find it for you guys real quick before I sign off here officially. Yeah, so you can see Poetry Online as an example, and I may review this one after the next episode. We'll see. I'm gonna start talking just for a few minutes about various lit magazine journals, and just discuss them. Um, so yeah, you can see I did the expedited option, and 3-day or one response to the past. So it indicates that by submitted. And I think I tried 3 times with them, guys, and it was a no. So I've taken sort of a break from submitting to places, to be honest. And I don't know if I'm going to submit, in the future or not. But yeah, totally. I'll let you guys know though. I'll let you guys know if, yeah, it's just because I have other things going on. So yeah, and I'm doing this series too, just when I can. But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to show that, you can save, and then it indicates whether you submitted in the past, um yeah, for like expedited here, you can see that, and the category. So yeah, the search is great. I love the tagging, and you know Subfolio has something similar to this too, which is really awesome, and I like that. Um because when others are looking for opportunities, they can come across other publications, right, with these search type of discovery pages, right. It centralizes everything. I really like that. Not all submission management systems have this, right. So I think it's way better, I think, than and I've used Google Forms in the past myself too, just like in for other things. Like a lot of academic institutions use it. Some award events use it too, but um yeah, you just have to read the guidelines very carefully. Be careful on websites and read how they're intaking submissions. There are times I've come into contact with others pretending to be, others, right? Creating fake emails and things like that. And, in fact, the Litmagger Journal only accepts submissions, through their submission management system, and someone's trying to like pretend they're someone and take money and stuff like that, So be careful of phishing emails and stuff like that in the community. It happens, totally. It happened this year with someone was trying to do that too, and even went sent emails to my staff and everything, and it was very, very messed up. I really was upset about that. So yeah, anyways, yeah, so a lot of opportunities out there again, both no fee and fees, right? So it's hard to find a lot of no fee places, but thanks to chill subs again, you can filter that out. Other directories too do a great job. Again, Duotrope, the Poets and Writers, there's several other ones out there that I shared on this podcast series too. So yeah, be sure to listen back to those other audio episodes for sure, where I discuss a little bit more on this and provided some links, to other places to find submission opportunities. So yeah, you're bound to find a place you really like, just keep trying, guys, for sure. So yeah, bye. Yeah, take care.